from the blackest corners of your mind, they call, pulling you deep into shadow, twisting your senses, keeping you from sleep. It's time to face your darkest fears. This is Tales to Terrify. Good evening, children of the night, and welcome to part 2 of this year's Stoker Award nominated tales. Since you already know all about the Stoker Awards from last week, I won't waste any time before we lurch straight into the shadows. Our first Stoker-nominated story for the evening comes from Rachael K. Jones. Rachael K. Jones is a critically acclaimed speculative fiction author in Portland, Oregon. She is a Bram Stoker Award nominee, World Fantasy Award nominee, and Tiptree Award honoree. Her fiction has appeared in venues worldwide, including multiple Year's Best anthologies, Lightspeed magazine, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and Strange Horizons. Follow her on Bluesky at rachaelkjones.bsky.social. Our story tonight has some heavy trigger warnings, so make sure to check out the show notes. And now, children of the night, join me for Rachael K. Jones's The Sound of Children Screaming, first published in Nightmare Magazine, October 2023.
The gun. You know the one about the gun. The gun goes where it wants to. On Thursday morning, just after recess, the gun will walk through the front doors of Thurman Elementary. And it won't sign in at the front office or wear a visitor's badge. The gun does most of its damage in the first 5 minutes. The gun doesn't care about lockdown drills, and it will not wait for the SWAT team to arrive. The gun can chew through a door, a desk, a cinder block wall, and kids don't wear those bulletproof backpacks during reading time. Everyone has a right to a gun. Nothing can take that away from you. What you lack is a right to the lives of your children. The gun likes a game of hide and seek. The gun will rove the grounds until someone stops it. The gun has been here many times before. The gun is not working alone. The shooter. He is never anyone special, just a man exercising his right to a gun. The teacher. Michelle Dalton has taught 4th grade for 9 years, long enough to know how the job yawns wider each year, collecting all the loose threads that society needs done but no one wants to pay for. Michelle has 6 figures in student loans and makes less than $50,000 a year. She shares a rental house with 2 roommates and has a weekend job at Track and Field, selling athletic shoes to make ends meet. She does not get paid overtime, and the school district does not buy the art supplies. She is not entitled to bathroom breaks or a non-working lunch, and she doesn't get paid for summers. Michelle wears the armor of an elementary school teacher. An A-line dress and an ocean print, a blue cardigan to match. She bears no weapon but a sharp-edged teacher's tongue that cuts through noise like scissors. Every teacher in Thurman Elementary will sense the gun moments before it opens fire as a tense, drawn-out pause. an upset child drawing the breath to scream. They will not visibly panic, not with 21 pairs of eyes locked upon them for guidance. Michelle's body will act before her mind comprehends the threat. It is Michelle's job to keep her students safe, just as it is her job to take the blame for whatever harm the gun inflicts in the process. The portal. You know about the portal, too, although not by that name. The portal seeks the places where children hide. It stalked the air raid shelters in London during the Blitz. It lurked in underground cellars during the Cold War, crouched between the canned corn and rancid Crisco. It has fed itself in Italian orphanages and Australian residential schools, and it has only gotten hungrier. The portal has been exhibiting itself at gun shows recently, a gleaming bulletproof vault in which to store kids when the shooter comes. The portal has been installed in every classroom, funded by bake sales and cereal box tops, bought at the expense of pencils and math books and a music teacher. The portal is not wheelchair accessible. The portal is a failure of policy. The portal was dressed up like a castle for Halloween. The portal is not a reading nook. There is nothing more necessary than the portal. The portal will keep the right children safe. Whatever the gun doesn't claim will get packed into the portal like coats at the Lost and Found. The school has a ritual for it. A special alarm. The children, sensing something wrong in the pop, pop, pop coming from the gym, will obey uncomplainingly when Michelle shoos them in. Michelle will enter last, pulling the door shut behind them. The portal is dark and humid inside. There are no windows or lights to attract attention. It is the gap beneath the bed where the monsters hunt. The portal's breath presses in around them, hot and stinking, as it swallows them down, down, down. Time doesn't stop inside the portal. It telescopes. The children strain their ears, listening for the classroom door. The popping sounds are approaching now. Pop, and it passes the fourth grade art wall. Pop, pop, pop at the water fountain. Pop, beside the mural of Rosa Parks. Pop, pop, and it has reached Miss Dalton's door. The siren continues its wail. Someone is sobbing in the dark. Someone has to pee. Someone refused to hug his mom goodbye at drop-off today and might never get the chance again. When the portal door opens, the gun will be waiting. But the children will not be in their classroom anymore. The mouse. Not like the mice that infest Thurman Elementary over the winter break. Not the wild ones that chew through the corners of the fun-sized cracker bags, leaving cellophane confetti in the snack bin. Not like the class mouse, tame in her cage with soft white fur and blood-red eyes, who holds out her little paws to accept a sandwich crust. This mouse has a gun. A copper blunderbuss with the end belled out like something out of Looney Tunes. His name is Sir Miles, and he has been hunting. He grooms the blood from between his claws like sticky jam as he considers the newcomers. A teacher and her 8 students lined up like chessboard pawns. It is his move. He is quite large for a mouse, nearly knee-high. He makes a sweeping bow with his tricorn hat as he introduces himself. His accent is a lilting brogue. He has perfect manners and rides a Shetland pony. His charm, too, is a weapon, subtle and efficient, as he makes a plea that sounds a little too rehearsed. A flim-flam man working over his newest marks. He demands the things men with guns always demand. He asks for someone else to fight his wars. His people rely on a steady supply of children from the world beyond, who are kind-hearted or brave or foolish enough to take up the magic crowns and wield the spells to make Sir Miles's enemies dead. He is very persuasive. His eyes shine with tears and he clasps his little paws as he pleads his case. The children, dazed in this strange new world, tear-streaked and shaken after the portal's darkness, are mesmerized. Mice are crepuscular, creatures of shadow and hidden intentions. They creep from their dens at sunset and feed all night long. They are averse to bright lights. Mice eat their own feces, but lack the ability to vomit. Sir Miles is full of shit, but he means business. The negotiation. Michelle also means business. She isn't fooled by this Narnia shit, the soft black eyes, or the tweed little jacket. She doesn't trust a mouse with a gun. Anyone in possession of a gun has made a plan to use it. But Dylan needs to pee, and Katie R and Katie V are sharing a coat in the drizzle, and it's almost time for lunch, and they'll all need to eat. The kids are already eyeing the mouse like they'd like nothing better than to bury their faces in his warm, soft fur, and it's only getting worse as he unspools his sob story. His oil drop eyes large with crocodile tears. If Michelle doesn't take charge, she'll lose control entirely. "I'm sorry for your troubles, but we're not getting involved in your war," she says sharply, cutting off the mouse mid-sales pitch. The rain is steadily increasing its barrage, snapping against the shale like fireworks. "Is there somewhere we can go to wait out the storm?" The mouse, steel-eyed, mounts his Shetland pony, settling in front of the corpse of the furred thing he just killed. He gives Michelle an unambiguous look of hate, like he has just spotted a particularly odious vermin. "Follow along," he says, and that predatory look submerges beneath his charm. "Castle Roland is just beyond the rise." Sir Mile keeps up a steady patter, dangling his problems like a pair of keys before a grabby toddler. Michelle knows his type. Men who force you into a shared predicament to short-circuit what your uneasy gut is screaming. What did he kill just before they arrived? And why did he use his hands when he had a gun? Michelle doesn't take her eyes off that gun as they follow the path behind the mouse. Everything in this world pierces. The dreary pines stab up at the gray sky, and the rain tattoos through her knit cardigan. She makes the children pair up and hold hands like they're making a bathroom trip. Blood runs down the pony's hind leg, leaving sticky, dark hoof prints. Michelle does not look back at the portal. She keeps her eyes on the gun. Castle Roland. Every mouse on the parapets is armed. The castle's walls are tall and pockmarked, and not one green thing grows in its courtyards. The mice have lined up gunny sacks for target practice. The volleys of gunfire blend with the pattering rain. The idea of a castle is to protect the things you love by walling them in and daring your enemies to take them. A castle, like a school, is a locked-up box for precious things. Because of this property, castles were once the sites of war, and their names evoked the bloodshed. Scarborough, Dover, Prudhoe, Kenilworth. In the distant future, castles will cease to be a symbol of war when governments find more civilized ways to regulate what one person can take from another. Children will enter castles with delight when they have never learned to fear them. Children will learn to fear their schools, though. The names will come to stand for another kind of warfare. The sites of battles waged and lost without the benefit of soldiers or a moat. Columbine, Sandy Hook, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, Rob. The pond. Castle Roland also has a pond, long and low, graveled around its edges with strange ivory pebbles, jagged as teeth. The water shimmers in the rain as though it has swallowed down the sun. The children want to get a better look, but Sir Miles hurries them along. Other people's children. Only 8 came through the portal. They are Lee, and Dylan and Nathan and Katie R and Katie V and Nevaeh and Caleb and Angelo. Most of them are 9 years old, except for Katie V, who turned 10 in September. The other 13 kids in Michelle's class, the lucky ones, yes, call them that, are still hiding in that dark closet, listening to the slamming doors, the pleading sobs of teachers, the shrieks of first graders trapped in the bathroom, and then pop, 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 the chalk-white silence left in the gun's wake. The feast. The grand hall is smoky and low, and a roast much too big to be poultry turns on the spit. Portraits loom over the long refectory tables, paintings of human children, regal in velvet and bone-white crowns, their mouths turned down, somber and thoughtful. Servant mice in pale blue smocks scurry down the table rows and ply the children with delicacies. Katie V gets a whole cake to herself, and Nathan eats lemon sorbet from a silver dish. It has been a very long walk, and they are too ravenous to resist. Even Michelle accepts a bowl of soup, though she dislikes the way that the mice seem prepared for their surprise guests. Like it was scheduled weeks ago, and everyone has rehearsed their roles. As the mice shoo the humans from the table, they file past the roast. A feline skull leers back at Michelle, the clawed, furry paws still attached to the leg bones. The portraits. None of the children in the portrait seem to make it past their teenage years. When Michelle asks Sir Miles about this, his whiskers twitch into a needle-toothed grin. "The magic of the crowns isn't for adults. Only children can wield them." When she asks what happens when the children grow up, the mouse just laughs her off. "We sent them home naturally," he booms. "What else would we do? Eat them?" An interlude. Michelle cannot sleep that night. The 8 sleeping children sigh and hum around the room. The girls tucked into the grand 4-poster bed, the boys burritoed in blankets on the rug before the crackling fireplace, and Michelle against the door to watch for intruders. Castle Roland feels more real than what happened to them at the school today. The alarm sounding, the pop, pop, pop in the hallway, the sobbing in the dark. At that moment, instead of her family, Michelle had found herself thinking of her weekend job. How they had no protocol at Track and Field for what to do if someone opened fire. This strange castle, with its mice and portraits and ivory pond, has a logic stronger than the laws of reality. All her life, Michelle had thought she knew what she would do if the gun came to her school. But the gun doesn't care about the stories people tell themselves in their own heads. A note about school safety. We will not try to prevent the gun. The gun will accept no limitations, but we will try very hard not to offend the gun. If you offend the gun, it may decide to get personal. Better to develop rituals against the gun. To train the kids to block the door, hide in the closet, play dead on the rainbow carpet where they do calendar time and sing the morning song. Better to invest in metal detectors. Better to ring the playground with barbed wire. To hire off-duty police instead of another counselor. You can have a special alarm for the gun. You can make the teachers draw the blinds, lock the doors, take the long route every day to recess in the name of safety. It doesn't matter if any of it works. The important thing is to have something to blame besides the gun. Best to treat the gun as a force of nature. Rare as an earthquake. A freak tornado. Best to accept the gun. It belongs here. It belongs everywhere. The gun will always be with us. If you try hard enough, maybe you can convince the gun to shoot someone else's kid instead. The tour. Perhaps the children would enjoy a tour of Castle Roland, Sir Miles suggests at breakfast. Unless you would prefer that I return you to your portal. It is a threat, and Michelle knows it. This world exists in a moment suspended in time. The instant between breaths, with the gun on the other side of the classroom door. Nothing could be more dangerous than returning home. Not even these predatory mice with their blunderbusses and their feud with the neighboring kingdom. But then Sir Miles shows them the armory. The armory. Gun racks hold row after row of blunderbusses, flintlocks, swords, and crossbows, sharp as a buckthorn thicket in winter. The children race through the rows of oiled metal, spitting out the gunpowder tang in their mouths and noses, until they find the 8 glass cases at the back. In each case rests a chalk-white crown. Their delicacy fascinates Michelle, like anatomical drawings of bird skeletons. The glass casing lifts off easily. When she picks up a crown, it has a soft texture like soapstone, only lighter. It is constructed from many fragments fitted together and polished smooth, except for some top bits that jut up, raw as broken teeth. Angelo has taken a crown into his hands. His eyes slingshot between Sir Miles and Michelle, seeking their permission. "Can I, Miss Dalton?" "Go on," Sir Miles encourages him. "Give it a try." "Angelo, wait!" Michelle begins, fear gripping her voice so it squeaks. But Angelo has already donned the crown. It fits like it was made for him. He stands a little taller, acclimating to the kingliness settling upon his shoulders. "It's true," Angelo shouts, his brown eyes bright and happy. "It's really magic. I can feel it." He lifts his hands, and to Michelle's horror, a dozen swords rise up from their racks like a cloud of startled pigeons. Powers. Every teacher knows the moment when they lose control of their classroom, and it usually begins with exuberance. Once on a Friday before a long weekend, Katie V's dad brought in birthday cupcakes, half chocolate and half vanilla. It was raining and nobody had been out for recess, and everyone wanted vanilla, but there weren't enough to go around. Then Katie V started crying because she didn't get the kind she wanted on her birthday, and Dylan squashed the unwanted cupcake on the floor, and then full-on chaos broke out. The kind that could only be stopped by flickering the light switch and making threats to cancel the afternoon movie. The crowns are like those cupcakes. Every child grabs one despite Michelle's attempts to stop them, and then there are a series of close calls when the swords and guns go clattering through the air, nearly beheading Caleb, who decides to retaliate. They call down fire and shadow. They scorch the stone walls black. Nevaeh freezes the air, pulling snow down inside the armory, and the other children run around, catching snowflakes on their tongues. Finally, Sir Miles leads the children out to the courtyard and Michelle follows behind, defeated and impotent, her voice hoarse, her right temple throbbing in the telltale sign of a migraine. Michelle doesn't blame them. She understands the source of their joy. Children rarely get to feel so powerful. Children spend their days being told what to do and where to go. They don't get to decide how they dress or what they eat. They aren't allowed to get angry or to dislike anyone, and if an aunt or grandpa wants a hug, the child will have to give it. Children only hold power in their games, which is why they make up superheroes. They play at telekinesis and pyrokinesis and mind reading. Children use swings to learn to fly, or they use sticks as makeshift wands. But now, that power is real. "That's enough," Michelle tells Angelo as he sets a row of gunny sacks on fire. "Let's go inside and have a break now." Gentle Angelo, who always volunteers to collect all the basketballs after recess, who always holds the door as they file out to the buses after school, glares up at Michelle. "You can't make me," he says. He is right. When some children grow up, they will buy themselves a gun so no one else can ever make them feel small again. They will not try to change how adults make children feel. The truth. The refectory tables have been removed from the Great Hall for the occasion. The mice crowd in for the coronation, hundreds of them packing the castle. Although they only rise to Michelle's knees, they force her apart from the children through sheer numbers, pushing her out, cutting her off, until she stands alone in the courtyard, the door to the hall slammed in her face. It is gray and raining. Alone, Michelle wanders the grounds as the guard mice eye her with open hostility. What do they do when the children grow up? But Michelle is already grown. The mice have no use for her now that they have pried her away from her students. She finds herself drawn to the glimmering ivory pool in its sunlit glow in the dreary rain. Her shoes crunch on the strange pointed gravel. The water swarms with koi, and beneath them, mounded like coral, are human skeletons. Too many to count. Rib cages and skulls and long, slim femurs buried in the finer knobbles of knuckle bones and teeth. The fish nibble at bits of connective tissue clinging to the fresher skeletons. Some of the bones are broken as though sawed open to lick out the marrow. None of this surprises Michelle. She knew from the moment she held that crown. Its soapstone texture. Its unusually light weight. The bones of children fused together and polished smooth. A vessel for their collective power once they grew too old to be of other use. Handed down to their successors to wield in turn. The last of Michelle's hope slips away as she gazes into the pool. Her student's fate is a tale of two deaths. One at the hands of the mice, who have no love for these children beyond their utility in war, and the other through the portal where the gun awaits, rattling the classroom doorknob. Become the weapon or its victim. Either way, they die. And if they stay, if they flee, who will wear those crowns next? Which classroom will the gun seek out instead? Someone will have to die. There is no one coming to help her. No one will stop the mice, the shooter, the cycle that returns them to this point, this pond, these children's bodies and their wordless accusation. Teachers have always been left alone, dancing around the gun, the portal, the crowns of bone, trying to keep other people's children safe with donated art supplies and cardboard tubes saved up for craft day. One thing is certain. Michelle will never tell her students about the bones. No child deserves to know how little the world regards them. But there are other weapons she can give her students. Truths as powerful as any magic crown. Agency. Into the Great Hall, then. Into the castle, where the mice are piping military tunes on ivory flutes as Sir Miles gives a speech. Michelle plunges into the thick of the cheering mice, forcing a path, though they scratch and tear at her legs and rip her dress to tatters. All those blunderbusses tip down and track her, the bells of deadly trumpets, as she approaches the dais, the 8 little thrones. The children unrecognizably regal in rich furred cloaks, sewn from the dappled hides of calico cats. "Wait!" Michelle cries out in her sharp teacher's voice, projecting over the din. "Wait a moment. I have something to say." Sir Miles stabs a clawed finger at Michelle, harpooning her with accusations. "See, your majesties, even now she plots to dispose you, to deprive you of your crowns. Strike her down with your power, or else give the command, and our soldiers will ensure she never troubles your reign again." All 8 faces turn to consider Michelle, frowning in displeasure. But she is no longer afraid. Unlike the mice, she loves these children. She bears the kind of love for them you can only have for children not your own. Children freely given into your care day after day in the trust that you will return them back again, imperceptibly older until eventually they become old enough to live on their own. And from that place, Michelle speaks to her students like she always has, giving them the knowledge of their own power and the strength to use it. "Those crowns belong to you," she tells her students. "Sir Miles is right about that. I won't ask you to give them back. But you have a choice now. You can fight for the mice in their war if you want, or we could go back home and help your friends. The choice is yours. Whatever you choose, I will help you." Sir Miles laughs, and the other mice echo him, certain in their victory. They have been plying these children with gifts and sweets and flattery, and don't believe dowdy buttoned-up Michelle can offer anything equally tempting. The children have been growing irritable during her speech, their faces pinched and unhappy. Lee stands up. Nevaeh twitches her cloak aside to bare her hands. "I know you'll make the right choice," Michelle tells them. "Whatever you do, Miss Dalton loves you." Michelle stares into the gun barrels trained upon her. Nathan glowers down at the crowd. KDR has flushed the deep red that foretells a tantrum, and Nevaeh raises her hands. Michelle closes her eyes, giving herself to their judgment. All 8 children begin to scream, and the sun answers. Bright lights. The sun sheds her gray robes and steps down into the great hall. The heat is incredible. The blunderbusses bloom like daffodils and drop their seeds in molten pools of brass. All the shadows burn away. In the courtyard, the bone pool hisses and steams as it boils off. Mice cannot tolerate bright lights, nor can anything that has made a habit of feeding on children. The air is hazy with the char of singed fur. Michelle should be charred too, but the 8 children run to her and throw their arms around her waist, just like when the dismissal bell rings and they don't want to say goodbye. How it ends. There is no happy ending when the gun visits a school. Even if it takes no lives, it will rob every child and adult of the bone-thin illusion that bad things only happen to other people's children. Those who prepared less, prevented less, who failed to hire enough cops or install enough bulletproof glass, who didn't run the backpacks through the metal detectors. People who deserved it somehow, who left a door propped open or a fence unrepaired. They will go to bed that night numb inside, neither scared nor angry, because it feels like slipping through a portal to a world where your hometown has become the legal hunting ground of angry men, and no one thought to warn you. Later, they will feel guilt and intense shame, like they should have done something differently, like they should have known the rules had changed that day and prepared accordingly. Like they forgot their jacket when everyone knew it would rain. The truth is that the portal has been growing, fed by the gun meal by meal, and it will swallow and swallow until every school lies in its belly, slowly digesting in a glimmering pool of children's bones, until someone decides to stop it. Michelle plunges through the portal, the children lined up behind her like they're off to art class instead of facing their deaths. The portal door bursts open upon the classroom at Thurman Elementary just as the doorknob turns, Michelle at the forefront and 8 kids in crowns behind her, confronting the gun with the bones of children. The bitter magic only children have the right to wield. Asking the question that answers itself, damning the gun with their bodies, their flesh, with the sound of children screaming.
That was Rachael K. Jones's Stoker-nominated tale, The Sound of Children Screaming, as read by Curtis Michael Holland. Curtis is a gay Greek Black Indigenous Canadian-born expat. He teaches and directs theater and voice acts from his home studio and local studios in his home, Hong Kong. He's an all-or-nothing kind of guy. You can either find him surrounded by a million of his closest friends or melting away in a sauna reading a scary book. Thank you, Curtis. Our second Stoker-nominated tale tonight comes from L.E. Daniels. L.E. Daniels is an American author, poet, and editor living in Australia. Her novel, Serpent's Wake, A Tale for the Bitten, is a notable work with the Horror Writers Association's mental health initiative and is written for adults contending with post-traumatic stress disorder. Lauren is an Aurealis Award-winning editor and finalist and an Australian Shadows Award finalist. Silk is her first Bram Stoker Award nomination. Listen with me, children of the night, to L.E. Daniels' Silk, first published in Hush, Don't Wake the Monster, Stories Inspired by Stephen King, by Twisted Wing Productions, March 2023.
(2010). The Carriage House Home for Aged Women, Spectacle Cove, Rhode Island. Memory is a bloody thing when you've lived snarled with secrets too long. As you watch the light change before sunset from your bed, everything you willed to forget gathers to dissect you to the bone. A dull headache looms, your mouth cottons, and the stool softeners worm their way around your guts. Still, before it grows dark, you think fondly of a son who doesn't visit much, but pays for a bed beside the window, where the bay shines gold. It gives you something to look at besides yourself, and you watch the shifting sea as if through a telescope from the moon. With hearing aids out of reach on the bedside table, the low pulse of what's left of your hearing is punctuated by distant screams, and your heart responds with an arrhythmic shudder. Your fellow residents are howling, sundowners. Their psychotic episodes plume as the sunlight fades. Like them, you're receding from this life piece by piece. But one thing tethers you to this bed. One thing anchors you here. More than the husband you didn't know how to live with, then learned to live without more than 60 years ago. More than the guilt of being a less than willing mother and a disinterested son to prove it. More than spending a lifetime on factory floors, envious of anyone with a high school diploma. And more than all the family you buried, whether you were speaking to them or not. None of whom, by the way, have stepped through the ether to show you the way home, if the stories from hospice nurse are even true. It's just you. And every day is the same, waiting for the pain medication to send you to sleep and hope this time it's for good. You startle. A swift, dark shape shoots past your window. The painful jolt jostles your spine. Even with dimming eyes, you know it was a barn swallow barreling into the eaves, and you swear you can hear the rattle of its roosting for the night, the tap, tap, tap of a beak and tiny scratching feet. Like the shadows now spreading on a dark purple bay, something calls to you, a thick, vicious groan, forcing you to remember the sacrifices you made, one by one, to the endless dark. In 1915, you were 5. You spent the summer sitting at your mother's side within the great thrumming aisles of the Kimball Silk Mill of South Kingston, coaxing pale filaments from wet cocoons after the caterpillars were boiled alive. Nearly bumped off yourself by polio, you spent the summer at the mill as you recovered from surgery. The doctors had snipped portions of your Achilles tendons in an attempt to flatten your feet. They were warped by the neurological damage of the virus, but the procedure didn't work. You still toe-walked alongside your mother, in your big sister's cast-off boots with newspaper stuffed into the gaps under your heels. And you defied the doctor's prognosis that you'd never walk again. You did all those yourself? Mr. Ross patted your head and puffed on a cigarette. Kid, you're fast. You can stay on the job as long as you like. She's going to school in September. Your mother said, her voice lilting with the Italian accent she always tried to dispel. With her brothers and sister. Pity. He continued toward his office above the factory floor. We'll miss you, kid. He disappeared up the steps to his office as you determined to work even faster. The more cocoons you unfurled without breaking the thread, the more money your mother took home. You were the smallest of 4, and your father said that of all of his children, you were the fiercest. You attended school and learned to read, but after a few fistfights in the schoolyard with kids who made fun of your limp, you were back in the mill by 10, standing in Mr. Ross's office with the weight of your mother's gaze upon you. The noise from the factory floor swelled around the room until he rushed in and closed the door. The thin plywood provided some relief from the racket below, and you exhaled, until the phone on his desk rattled and startled you. 1 second. He lifted the mouthpiece and placed the receiver to his ear. Uh-huh. Yep. Get the ladder, Billy. Yep. The family needed the money, and you weren't cut out for the books like your sister. Your parents' jobs and the tailoring your mother took in wasn't enough. Your 2 oldest brothers had joined the Navy and hadn't sent home any pay yet. Your sister needed tuition for secretarial school. She gave you the hand-me-down dress, hand-stitched by your mother, and it hung from you, boxy and itchy. They grow up fast, don't they? He replaced the receiver, straightened his navy blue silk tie with a gold paisley print into his vest, and sat behind his desk. He motioned for your mother to take the other chair. When he asked your age, you looked him right in the eye and lied easily. I'm 12 and I'm fast. You know I'm fast. You stood as tall as you could and frowned like the faces you'd seen on your way in. He smiled, softening the sharp angles of his face. Good. That's just what we need. What about the polio? He pointed to your oversized boots. You get around okay? What polio? You shot a look at your mother. She winced, but you continued. I ran up those stairs so quick you didn't even see me do it, did you? He laughed as he handed your mother a paper, and she folded it away into her purse for you to read to her later. You stole a glance from his wide office window that looked out upon the workers buzzing away on the expansive floor, the machinery spinning. You saw Billy, his floorman, expertly weaving through the aisles, a wooden ladder under one arm. Fast, like everyone down there. Like you. You joined the night shift with your mother, ensuring silk threads never broke. feeding rows upon rows of spools that never stopped twirling in their hunger for more. Your mother ran a line of looms through the night while you clopped along the wooden floor in your boots. A few months into your job, when the moon shined dusty and fat through the long factory windows, you were replacing full spools of silk with empty ones when a peculiar movement in the rafters caught your eye. You paused at your cart. A little bird twitched in the beams above the clattering machinery. It was panting, revealing a mouth the color of marigold. You realized that if that bird pooped into the silk, you didn't know how much would be docked from your pay. It fidgeted on the beam, and you saw from its dark points and tawny breast that it was a swallow. You pushed your cart against a brick pillar and opened windows against the moon-soaked night. When the sweeper kid circled a row of machines, trying to look busy with his broom, you signaled him. "Hey, Nicky!" you shouted over the din. "Get a ladder!" You held the ladder steady against a pillar while Nick climbed, fluff and lint stuck all over his woolen short pants, his rump in your face. You passed his broom up to his waiting hand. Nick swung at the bird, hitting it harder than you'd hoped. It fell, stiff with terror, black, shiny button eyes flashing as it tumbled into the web of wriggling threads, tangled into taut wires of silk. Little wings twisting asunder. The spools spun, twirling and whirling, and the bird rolled, ugly in its writhing and threatening to pop several threads of silk all at once. Swiftly you left the ladder and reached into the shivering threads for the bird. You turned just in time to see Nick fall hard against the wooden slats of the mill floor, the ladder crashing on top of him. You withdrew your hand. Cradling his head, Nick revealed bright red fingertips as blood oozed and dripped on the floorboards. When he stumbled to his feet, he left a crimson smear where he'd fallen. Billy, the floor man, appeared out of nowhere and caught Nick as he staggered. "You two palookas!" Billy shook Nick by a shoulder. "What's this?" A bird. You reached into the threads again, your heart pounding. Nick looked like he was fighting off tears. Billy touched his head and sent him home. The row of machinery paused for a whole 60 seconds. The stillness around you was like a church, even though the other rows still hummed. You parted the threads to tease the broken bird free so it could die in your hands. When the machinery heaved into action again, a hiss filled the air, and you were terrified the floor man would blame you. But he didn't. He just pointed to the mess in your hands and said, "Don't take it home and eat it. I know what you guineas are like. Clean up the floor." Billy walked away from you, taking the ladder with him until he paused to talk to pretty Edie in the next aisle. The bird in your hand was soft and warm, and Nick's blood on the floor shone bright red. You bent to look closer. It was swirling, like it was cascading down a drain. The wooden floor hadn't seen a lick of oil in ages, and it was pulling the blood right down into its pith. Peering closer, you felt something heave, like a ripple in the air or across the walls. You weren't sure. But when you looked up, the machines whirred faster and spun cleanly, without any evidence of the disaster. You pocketed the bird and wheeled your cart along the row, and the spools spun so fast you had to replace them all before you could clean the floor. By the time you returned with a bucket and brush, the bloodstains were gone. You stood there in disbelief, wondering if you had the right aisle. But you did. At the end of your shift, you counted 60 spools over the usual output, all feeding into the looms in your mother's section. When you punched the time clock, you didn't tell your mother about Nick, who you never saw again, or the bird. The bird. You pushed your hand in your pocket and found that it had bled through the fabric of your dress. You threw it into the shrubs by the factory doors, and it didn't make a sound as it slipped through the branches into the darkness. A few months later, when the moon hung orange and low, things went tail up for pretty Edie, too. Since your first shift, you stole looks at Edie through the machinery and shuddering lengths of silk threads, and you saw how she flirted with Billy. She had moxie, and now she had a little gold bracelet that flashed from the crimp of her shirt sleeve. Your mother told you that girls did bad things to get gold bracelets, so you never wanted one. But still, you felt your cheeks burn every time she caught you staring. Edie said she was 16, but maybe she was a tall 14. She had long chestnut hair, and she wore it all pinned up in a big floppy bow she made herself from fabric offcuts. You asked her to make you one, and even stole some offcuts from your mother's sewing basket. But she never did. She kept your offcuts, though. Unlike everyone else, she also left her station to drift past Billy and saunter into the washroom. Billy let her go when he never let anyone else go during their shifts, not even your mother. But that night, with the moon fleshy and full in the window, Edie came back from the washroom with her hair askew and her nose red. When you asked what happened, she pushed you away. "Get lost, Gimpy," she sneered from behind the hair which had fallen from her bow. As she retreated back to her section, you saw the tear in her skirt, right at the side seam, and she wasn't walking right. The grace in her gait that you envied was gone, but she was still pretty. You were never pretty. Your whole family told you that. Your older sister got the looks and the brains. Your brothers were tall and handsome and charming. What did you have? A broken nose from your father for lying about stealing your mother's offcuts, and a job at the mill. The moon was gone and the light was lifting outside, and when you were counting your spools, Edie came up real close and said, "Can you help me?" "Get lost, Chippy." You spat a word your mother used for girls of ill repute, and suddenly wished she would die. "Enjoy your breaks while the rest of us are cramping up." Even from the corner of your eye you saw her slump, but you ignored it and your heart skipped at your courage to reject her. You emptied your cart and looked up just in time to see Edie climb a ladder and step onto the ledge of the pale third-story window. She hugged her body close to the pane in the early morning light, then dove head first with terrible force. You held your breath as you ran to the glass and saw her crumpled and twitching on the gravel road below. Face down, her head was crammed between her shoulders, and her body was all twisted up like that bird. The gravel bloomed in the shadows beneath the folds of her skirt and began to swirl, black and shiny like oil. You swooned and clung to the sill, and the bricks that framed your view inhaled. The road rippled like a skirt around the mill, and the whole building quaked. You felt it. You know you did. And when you looked down at your hands clutching the windowsill, Edie's gold bracelet sat coiled between them. You pocketed it. Beside you, Billy gripped your shoulder and you gasped. You thought he saw you take the bracelet, but he just stared out the window, down at the ground. He coughed raggedly and clutched at his chest and said, "Oh, Christ! Oh, Christ!" When the machines groaned louder now, Billy looked at you searching. His mouth gaped as he swept his gaze across the rolling factory floor. The machines wailed hot like a mammoth pipe organ at church, and that's when you knew what was happening. The lights surged overhead. The floor rocked, and a mist of silk dust rose from the speed of the spinning spools. Somehow the mill drank Edie into it and churned her into silk. You broke from Billy and stumbled as you rushed to thread and rethread like there were 3 of you on the job. Your feet tripped you up and you fell and split your chin, but you only redoubled your effort. At the close of your shift, you counted and saw that production had doubled. There were more silk spools than the looms could manage, and you boxed them. You volunteered for another shift to cover for Edie, you told your mother. Mr. Ross came in with the police that morning. He looked at you grimly and thanked you for your dedication at this time of need. Your mother squeezed your arm hard and begged to take you home, but you refused. "Let her work," Mr. Ross said. "It's better to stay busy." Your mother told you she was worried about you before she went home, but Mr. Ross doubled your pay. You knew your mother wasn't well as she leaned over her loom. You were 17 and didn't miss a thing. She was pregnant and throwing up again, and then she wasn't. Over the years, you watched her do things to her body with the same lie she used to make soap for the family. At home, you saw her stagger toward the outhouse and groan, sometimes dropping to her knees before she got there, and you always helped her. That night, under a glittering moon, as snow fell in dry, miserly flakes outside, you followed the urge to check on your mother. And it was clear, even in the jaundiced light, that the flesh around her mouth cast a green hue, while the rest of her face was white as paste. Your mother had bled through her clothes, oblivious to the red sheen that ran down the leg of her stool and seeped into the thirsty cracks of the floorboards. A white-hot rage boiled inside of you at the sight. At your father's recklessness, at Billy's stupidity, and even at Mr. Ross strolling past his office window, but you let nothing show. You leaned in close and motioned for her to follow you. She half stood, half crouched, pained in a way you'd never seen before. "I got it, Ma." You wrapped your cardigan around her waist and escorted her to the washroom. You glared at Billy and he averted his eyes, as he'd always done since Edie. "Take your time," you told her and left her there. You tucked her soiled underclothes under your arm and rode the automatic elevator until it released you to the basement. Bare bulbs lit the unfinished portion of the cellar that housed an industrial incinerator, and in the lowest corner past the ridges of the abandoned bricks, concrete rubble and rotten footings that gave way to damp, bare soil, a gaping hole in the ground smelled like a brackish well. By now you'd fed it so many things. Edie's gold bracelet, handfuls of live silkworms, mice, even a few stray cats who'd been dazzled by the headlamps of Mr. Ross's swerving automobile. You'd thrown in Hessian sacks of unwanted puppies or a stolen piglet whenever machinery failures had you worried for your job. And it worked. every time. The results were in the numbers, in the airy softness of the silk, and sometimes the way the colors simply popped, as Mr. Ross put it. Worst of all, you threw in every single one of the sad little birds your mother couldn't bear to touch after her body had expelled them. Wrapped in off-cut material, you cast them in, and they sailed into blackness, absorbed as the lights around you surged. The very foundation shook as the cardinal red or royal blue nearly levitated from gloved hands on the factory floor. And Mr. Ross bought a new black Pierce Arrow convertible and continued to expand his mill. He had so many different silk ties, he gave them away and never wore the same one twice. The stock market crashed in October 1929. You were 19. Only a few weeks before, Mr. Ross promoted you to floor girl at Kimball Silk Mill, the first one ever, and you didn't get a gold bracelet doing it. You knew every inch of the mill and how Mr. Ross built it on swampland that no one wanted, which explained the big drainage ditch in the cellar. Mr. Ross also told you that there was a massacre, the Great Swamp Fight, between the colonials and the Narragansett people of this land, and you wondered to yourself if all that bloodletting is what bewitched the place. This was also the year your mother died. Cancer bloomed from all the lie she put in her body, and your father grieved by working overtime and finding a girlfriend he thought was a secret. You practically lived at the mill, and Billy did whatever you said. Mr. Ross had called you to his office, a newspaper sprawled before him, pinned by a glass of whiskey. Panic was the only newsprint word you read. "Your family," he told the wall. "You've always been family." And you thought about your family. How your brothers never came back for more than an afternoon. How your sister got that secretarial job and left for Manhattan. You wondered what your mother got. Your father, what you got. You looked down at the smart top and skirt you earned, at the shoes on your feet. You could buy heels now that disguised your deformity. 2-inch military heels with a patent-trimmed strap called the Savoy. You never wore hand-me-downs again. And this family's in trouble. His eyes were sunken, bloodshot, and you smelled the booze. We're in the red and we gotta get out of it. People always want silk, you said. Even if they can afford nothing else, they'll buy a little square of silk. They need to buy more than that. We need something special to make sure of it. You've never been with a boy, have you? What? No. You should know. Billy didn't hurt Edie. He knew what she was worth to me. You know he hurt her. Why else did she? You can't say the rest. No, you've never been with a boy. There's a dozen ways to enjoy a girl while keeping her intact, and Billy was a pervert. Mr. Ross said was. You looked out the big window past the idle workers huddled in groups, past the silent machinery that had ground to a halt at the news of the market crash, past the brick pillars to the open grate of the automatic elevator. You realized then that you hadn't seen Billy all night. When you looked back at Mr. Ross, you understood. He knew all about his mill's appetites, and you were pretty sure he knew you did too. I want to show you something." He stood abruptly and tugged the handrail on the way down the steps from his office. The workers watched you, eyes black with fear. Mr. Ross held the elevator open for you and took you down. "You know what I told you about this place? How I could never fill this hole?" He motioned. "It ate everything we put in there. Backfill, bricks, concrete. It's insatiable." His hands shook while he spoke. You hung back, lingering near the incinerator. "You wouldn't believe what I threw down there last night. Come, have a look." You shook your head. "Just come here." You inched closer. In a sudden burst, he tackled you. You felt the sharpness of his bones and lean muscle. He clapped a hand over your mouth and dragged you forward as you flailed until, with a great heave, he threw you into the hole. The world went light dark, and you tried to catch your hands on something and felt the skin of your fingers split. You spun, and when you bumped your head, you thought you heard a fragment of a song, your mother singing in Italian, like she did when you were sick with polio, before your father made her use only English because you were Americans now. You slid and you heard babies crying, or were they puppies? And you thought you saw a spray of birds chirping in the black air around you as you reached through them to grab a hold of something and stop sliding into darkness. The light of the cellar was still up there, and you stood on something that crunched like old bones. You rubbed your head, but everything was numb. You smelled your fingers, but it wasn't blood. It was the oily brine and sour decay of the hole itself. You wiped your hands on your skirt. Something glinted on a stone, and you grabbed it. Edie's bracelet. You climbed toward a ledge just as a thick hand grabbed your wrist and pulled you up. Your eyes adjusted. Billy. He groaned as he leaned back, prone on a narrow ledge. "I can't stop bleeding." A dark shape protruded from his chest. His fingers tapped on the stony ledge around him, his nails scratching. "You gotta get out," Billy whispered, lifting his chin toward another small ledge above him. "There." He reached for you, and you scrambled over his chest onto the ledge. He slid on his back and pushed you up with his feet, with a grunt that turned phlegmy until he fell silent. Quietly now you climbed against stones and old root systems puffed up like varicose veins. You smelled Mr. Ross's cigarette and crept closer to the mouth of the hole, toward the gauzy light of bare light bulbs. You heard Mr. Ross weeping and cursing and lighting another cigarette. The matchhead smoked as it flicked past your face. Surprising him was your gift. It had always been your gift. And you clawed your way up his trouser leg like a cat. He kicked at you, but he slipped and hit the ground. You struck his nose with your elbow. As you climbed over him, you hammered him with your 2-inch spike heels, suddenly thrilled by the way they gave you purchase, his body a ladder until you pushed off from his shoulders and leapt from the hole. You heard a sharp crack of bone as he collided with Billy below. And now, back in your bed, all you hear is that screaming again. The sundowners. It's close and suffocating, and you squeeze your eyelids tight, and wish those bastards would shut the hell up for just one night. You kick against the blankets and hit out with your bony fists. But you feel restraints on your wrists. And when you open your eyes, you understand. As the light fades outside the window, reason dawns. It's you. It's always been you. You and the mill, and that hideous ground that marked you with its brine. It's searching for you always. You, the one that stole away. The stench of sour decay winds through your nose and mouth, and the bed itself writhes with roots that stretch over your legs and pull you in. The clatter and groan of the machines fill your ears. Silk dust shimmers inside your eyelids, and worms twitch and drown again and again inside the eggshell of your skull and your congested lungs. When you open your mouth, reams of silk spill out across your bedclothes. All black now, just shining, oily black. It's always been you, thrashing as the last breath of sunset rolls across the bay and sinks, leaving you alone, dreadfully alone again in the dark, with everything you thought you'd cast away.
That was L.E. Daniels' Silk, as read by Nikolle Doolin. Nikolle is a writer and voice actor. She performs for a number of popular and award-winning podcasts, such as the No Sleep Podcast, Far-Fetched Fables, and Tales to Terrify. To learn more about Nikolle, visit her website at NikolleDoolin.com. Thank you, Nikolle. Well, children of the night, the hour is late, and we've run out of tales to tell. For now. Tales to Terrify is made possible by the tremendous generosity of our supporters on Patreon and PayPal. Incredible fans like Lestle Baxter, Paul Belcher, Amanda Carrillo, Amanda Gottfried, and Orion D. Hegre, whose generous support helps keep the lights on and flickering ominously. Not a supporter already? Head over to patreon.com/Tales to Terrify, where you'll find all kinds of perks, like ad-free episodes, bonus content, and one-of-a-kind collectibles and merch packs. Every dollar goes back into this show to make it as horrific as possible, and we appreciate it so much. Want another way to support the show that doesn't cost a cent? Head over to Podchaser, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating or review. You'll not only put an unnaturally wide smile on our faces, but help new listeners discover our terrifying tales too. Why not share your love of the show out in the world with some Tales to Terrify merch? TalesToTerrify.com/merch will take you to our TeePublic store, where we've got a great collection of creepy custom and curated designs, so you can show those around you just how twisted you truly are. Tales to Terrify is produced by Seth Williams, Meredith Morgenstern, Andrew Gibson, Crystal Hammond, Spencer Disparty, and myself, Drew Sebastini, with original theme by Nebulous Entertainment. Tales to Terrify is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Join us again next week as we awaken ancient evils with more tales to terrify.